So I'm sure you've heard recently that Shamima Begum has made an appeal to the Supreme Court in the UK and to the UK government to come back to the UK. And of course, the Supreme Court and the British government have declined. They're not interested in her coming back into the country. They've pretty much made it clear that they know too much about her and they think that she's too much of a risk to bring back into the country because she's had dealings with ISIS and some of the comments that she made a little while ago regarding the Manchester bombings and all kinds of things. You know the history, I don't need to get into it. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to answer the question, did I think that she should be brought back into the country? And I really just wanted to give you my analysis and the way in which I was thinking about this before I came to the conclusion. So let me give you my answer straight away, and my answer is no. I do not think, if I was in the position where I was being the minister who was being asked whether it was my decision whether she comes back into the country or not, my answer would be absolutely, if I can't even speak today, you know what I'm saying, it would be no. So I wanted to give you my thoughts and my analysis as to why I came up with this, and just make some comments that maybe you might find interesting. You might agree with me, you may not agree with me, but perhaps we can have a conversation about it together. So I firstly wanted to say it's just really interesting because I was thinking about the fact that when you are 15 years of age, which is when she left to go to Syria, when you're about 15 years of age, I was thinking about the fact that you, in order to be lured or to be attracted to what I call the dark side of life, to be attracted to the extreme side of life, as I said, to be attracted to the extreme side of life, you have to have originally a certain type of leaning, because most people would not be attracted, for example, to there is loads of us who see crime around us and who see stealing and who see gun crime and who see weed and who see all of these dark aspects of humanity, but yet we're not lured to it. And part of that is because you have to have a certain leaning, a certain characteristic, certain traits in order to be lured to that side of life. Just like some people are lured towards animals, right? Some people just naturally get on with animals better than other people do. Animals are attracted to them, they get what animals are feeling, they just know what's wrong with an animal. They just do. There's some people just have that kind of leaning. And as a result, if you are at 15 leaning towards what would be considered an extreme aspect of life, then it tells me, firstly, that there are three things, particularly with your guidance, that's missing. Number one is to do with ideology, number one is to do with presence, and the other one is to do with needs. Ideology meaning that if you are lured towards wanting to go to that aspect of life, that means that the people who the parental guidance that you've had and the people who've brought you up have essentially only exposed you to one ideology. Because if you've been brought up with the ideology of being introduced to Islamic ways of life, to Hinduism, to Taoism, to humanism, you've looked at Buddhist, you've looked at Christianity, you will be exposed. Right? One of the keys that I talk about in life that's really important for human beings is to have exposure. So if you've been exposed to life and you've been exposed to all these different religions, then one of the great things about life is that you have comparisons. I think where it gets really dangerous and people become really dangerous, and in fact you see it a lot with people like Hitler, Mussolini, because I've studied all these individuals who've gone down that dark side of life, is that they've been introduced to a certain ideology, and that ideology has basically consumed their life. And so one of the things that I'm constantly drumming across to parents is that whilst absolutely, if you believe in politics and you believe in the Conservatives, yes, you should drum that towards your children and that's what you believe. But you've also got to make them aware of all the other ideologies and the other parties, because if you don't, their judgment is screwed. right, is skewed. Sorry, the way that they think is off. They're not really having an overview of what actually is the truth. They're only seeing what is a truth. I talk about the difference between a truth and the truth. A truth is how you see the world. And if anybody else sees the world differently in that area, that means that you're only seeing one aspect. The truth is how things actually are. You can't argue it. For example, a truth is the law of gravity. Doesn't matter whether you agree with me or we disagree or you're white or black. I'm telling you, if you go on top of a building and you jump off it, you're going down and you are never going up. So that's one of the first things, is about ideology. Second thing is about presence. This tells me that, I mean, one of the things that Shamima did, it was she was able to get in contact with people online. She was able to speak to ISIS directly because that's where she felt she could get the truth. So that kind of asks me, number one, as a parent, how attuned are you to your child? Why is it that your child feels that there is something which they basically don't believe the information that you're giving them? Why is it, as a brother, as a sister, people around this girl, why is it that she's feeling like she has to go to a different country to an extreme mentality to be able to gain information? And worst of all, why are you not protecting her as a 15-year-old? And I'm going to talk about malevolence in a second, but we all know that 15-year-olds are vulnerable. We all know that they're looking to fit in. They're looking for answers. In fact, when I studied the dark aspects of life and I looked at gangs, and I looked at London gangs, what a lot of London gang leaders do is that they recruit young people. You've never seen gangs recruiting people who are 40 years of age. Why? Because we know when somebody's 40, they're not easily influenced. They don't know what the truth is. Now, let me give you further information and take this a step further. I looked at how can you manipulate a human being, and I found that one of the ways in which you manipulate a human being is to confuse them. If you look at people who manipulate people, particularly like in abusive relationships, women who are in abusive relationships, one of the things that happens to them is that their judgment gets screwed up. For example, the man is fine for like 5 years in the relationship, and then all of a sudden he goes mental and just punches her, and he says it's her fault. She's now confused as to, wait, where did this come from? What did I do? He was like this and now he's like this, right? When somebody's it's what they do in the army. When people go into the army, one of the things that they do in the army is that they confuse candidates, right? They wake them up at 5 o'clock. They get them wet. They get them to do boots. One day they think that they are recovering, and then they get them to do a march. Basically, the candidates get confused, and it's easier to manipulate somebody when they're confused. So one of the things that you have to know is at 15, kids are going to be confused, which means they're more vulnerable to things that are coming from outside. They're trying to figure out what is important to them. So I was thinking, where was the people in the present? Where was people in Shamima's life who were present? And as I think about that in my own family. I think about that with my friends. And I would encourage you to think about that. But the last thing that I was thinking about is the needs. We know that human beings have psychological needs to fit in, to be liked. And I was thinking, why did she have parents and friends and people around her, and she felt that those needs were not being met in some way? That she had to go to abroad and find a husband and find the need to find a purpose, because she felt that when she went, her purpose was to go and get married and have children. Why was she having that purpose, right? Who gave, like, shouldn't we as brothers and sisters be helping each other to be refining what our purpose is and what our philosophy is? And I was just thinking about that. Let me take this to the next point that I wrote down. You have to have common sense and not be exposed to anything which is different. So I wrote down that part of the reason why I think that you shouldn't let her back into the country is that, look, I think there is a certain common sense that each one of us has in life. We just know when something isn't right. And I get worried because knowing that at 15, if you're recruited by somebody and they have you and you have an extremist mentality, the chances of you going backwards, of having a completely different ideology, to me, as far as I've found with research, is almost impossible. To be recruited by an extremist mentality where you've basically been told that these people are the enemy, these people are bad, blah blah blah, and you've been bombarded with that time after time after time, and you've seen death and you've seen all these things. These are so extreme that the chances of you essentially counteracting them has to be with something virtually extreme. And so what I was thinking about is, if you didn't use your common sense and realize, okay, if I'm flying to a different country and my family don't really agree with it and it's not feeling right and it feels risky, that means I know she was 15, but even at 15, most kids know drugs are not good, I shouldn't go here, I shouldn't go there. We all have a sense of what is dangerous. And I get worried because if she didn't have that, it's going to be a really difficult thing to develop as you get older. And so that means that this ideology of extremism would have soaked into her and she wasn't able to fight it off. She wasn't able, I think you see where I'm going with this. It's just really difficult if you already didn't use common sense to develop common sense as you get older. One of the other things that I was thinking about is, this was teaching me about how important story, narrative, a story arc, and remorse is. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and we were talking about the fact that most people don't understand, particularly men, we don't understand the importance of the word I'm sorry, or the words I'm sorry. Just saying I'm sorry to somebody, most of us don't understand the power of it. And this all came from the fact that I basically love, there's a program on TV called Traffic Cops. And I was saying that basically I was watching one particular episode and a boy was driving too fast and almost killed a police officer. And the boy, after he was arrested and stopped, basically said, I'm really sorry, I made a mistake. And the police officer was like, okay, it's fine, you're young, you've just got your license, I know that young people can make silly decisions, but you apologize, just don't do this again and learn from it. And yet in the same episode, somebody else did the same thing, but the level of aggression that they were shown, the level of animosity which was shown to them by the police officer because they were fighting, they were rude, they were arrogant, was unbelievable. And I was saying that part of the reason why so many people disagree with bringing Shamima back into the country is that Shamima doesn't really understand the magnitude of what she's done. She isn't remorseful. People can't sympathize with her. There isn't a story arc. There isn't a character arc. We can't see the progress that she has made over time. And one of the things that I talk a lot about with people is that extremes call for extremes, meaning if you have been doing drugs and been involved in the criminal activity for the last 10 years, in order to be a good person, for anyone to believe you, you almost have to go the extreme opposite. You have to do absolutely nothing to do with drugs. You have to be a great person. You have to be an abiding citizen, a law-abiding citizen. It has to be the complete opposite for it to work, because an extreme, a medium cannot cancel out an extreme, if that makes sense. And I was just thinking about how many of us in life don't understand how important it is to say I'm sorry, to just apologize. Like, it could literally save us so much time and help us so much in life. But the other one that I wanted to finish off with is about the importance of teaching children malevolence, because I think when you don't learn that there are evil people out there in the world, it gives you a screwed up vision of what life is. Part of why Shamima went to Syria and she went to join ISIS is because she thought that they were this great movement and they were going to protect people. But clearly her parents did not teach her about malevolence. They didn't teach her that there are dark people in this planet who will do you harm, who intend to hurt you, who will do crazy things, including killing people in pursuit of what they believe, right? And I think if you don't believe that, your world is kind of screwed and flawed. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday and I was explaining to them that one of the most they was saying to me that ignorance is bliss. I said ignorance is not bliss, ignorance is dangerous. Because if you don't know any better, if you don't know that the danger exists, that that with light there has to be darkness, and you don't study the darkness and you don't protect yourself against the darkness, it means that you're exposed to it. And I was explaining to him that that's what happened in Germany during World War II. Loads of ordinary people made atrocities and committed atrocities because they didn't know any better. They didn't realize that their country could be taken over and they could be forced to do these ridiculous things. I've studied a lot of Holocaust survivors, and one of the tactics that the Germans used was fear. People would dob on other Jews because they didn't want to be the ones who were arrested or found out. And it's such, I mean, a lot of people would never dob on their family or their friends or their neighbor. But people did crazy things. I remember the Rwandan genocide, where literally people were going and killing their neighbors because of what they believed. And you just think, how can a normal person be friends with their neighbor today and the next day they go and kill them? All part of that is because people don't believe that they have the capacity for malevolence, right? And part of me looking at Shamima is that I understand that she has the capacity for malevolence. If she was put in the right conditions, under the right circumstances, she could do atrocities on the planet to other people. She could do dangerous, dangerous things if she was put under the right circumstances. So I don't know whether any of that has been enlightening. I don't know whether you agree with me, disagree with me or not. Comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But that's what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon. Bye for now.